Hello and welcome to Pro Baseball World Tour here on RGC Multimedia. My name is Rick Crabb, and joining me on the line is our co-host. He is at a different location at the moment, heading south for the winter, pretty much. Mr. Eric Marenbach. Eric, thanks for joining us again. How was your weekend, and how's your trip so far down south?
It's actually going well. I'm kind of like the swallows from Capistrano. Collections out stuff for the winter. Except in my case, I'm actually driving, so it'll take a little longer. But the weekend was basically good, watching all kinds of baseball from Korea, Mexico, Dominican, and beyond, which is my main goal anyway.
Oh, there you go. Covering the world of baseball, which is what we're trying to do, and you're succeeding at it for sure. Well, that's awesome. Okay. All right. Well, we definitely have a lot to talk about. We have the Korean series going on at the moment. As of this broadcast, the NC Dinos have a 3-2 lead in the series to the Doosan Bears. Few interesting things about that series. Doosan has been kept scoreless in the last two innings, and there's been plenty of KBO-ness from both teams in this series, but it's been an exciting series, especially with the amount of fans in the Sky Dome, despite the reduced attendance per the Korean government. Eric, what's your take? Any observations about the series so far?
I gotta tell you, 2 shutouts in a row for Doosan. They're in deep trouble. You know, it's like when all of a sudden the team stops hitting and or stops taking advantage of opportunities, everything goes south in a hurry. And I'm sorry to say for all the Doosan fans in attendance, but the way that Brushinski's been throwing the ball, even if it is versus Alcantara, I'm liking Doosan. I'm liking NC to take it. If not tomorrow, then maybe on Wednesday.
I am too. Yeah, I am too, and I know when we first discussed the series before it happened, we thought Doosan would take it because of their experience, and it seemed like they had momentum going into the series, but NC's seemed to pull it together, definitely with some clutch pitching, some interesting developments as far. I mean, the last loss that NC had to Doosan was because of the dreaded KBO-ness, basically defensive lapses. But there was an interesting call too. I think it was either in Game 3 or Game 4. Which was the game where they had the bunt attempt and they had like the review as far as call at the plate, that kind of thing? You remember?
That was in 4.
That was in Game 4. Okay.
And I couldn't understand that myself. And apparently, according to our KBO insider, certain plays aren't reviewable. Bunt attempt / hit by pitch. So I don't know which part of it was actually reviewable, which part wasn't, and why the play wound up the way it did. I think everybody was confused to the point where it could have been called a do-over. I mean, I'm not by Korean standards, but these umpires were so goofed up by the play that that's the only fair way to possibly do it. Because in my mind, and I'm sure you'd agree, it was definitely bunted through, and then it hit him.
Right.
Not once, but I think it actually hit him twice.
Yeah, I know it hit him at least once on the foot. I mean, I don't understand why that wouldn't be reviewable and why that wouldn't be, like, I don't know, like a foul ball or whatever. Or, that's, I don't know, it was kind of strange, but...
It was very strange. I think everybody at the booth was confused between Daniel Kim and Ravage and Eduardo. I think everybody was a little, throwing their hands up in the air. So if you could have done a do-over, that was probably the case to do it. But
I mean, I can see Ravage and Eduardo. I mean, they've seen a lot of baseball and they're used to, how the American version of the game is played. But if Daniel Kim is confused, I mean, something's got to be wrong. And what's interesting about that league, Eric, if this were a regular season game and not the Korean series, I would imagine that the KBO might actually have a talk with these umpires and send them down to the future leagues. I mean, that's happened a few times this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it happens right at the beginning of the year. I don't know if being the postseason, there is some sort of umpire accountability that gets held over for next year. That would be my case.
Right. And for a play to be not reviewable in the Korean series, I mean, what if it were a disputed call, where it takes a run off of the board or adds a run to the board, or, where it could actually cost a team not only that game, but also a series? I mean, you would think, if anything, I mean, we've seen in other sports and in other leagues, usually the championship series has usually their, I don't know, what they call their dream team of referees or umpires or whatever. And I would imagine the KBO would have a similar philosophy, but that was a head scratcher right there.
Definitely. And like I said, 2 straight shutouts for NC over Doosan, where it's not necessarily that play in particular that's basically retarding Doosan's bats, but you never know.
Right. You never know. And I thought it was interesting, too. It seems like the Dinos are employing... I think we're starting to see a trend here, Eric, where teams are actually using starting pitchers to close. I mean, I don't remember the Dinos ever having a foreign-born, bullpen or a closer or anything of that nature. I mean, usually a lot of the foreign-born pitchers are starters, and yet I believe in Game 3 they had a gentleman close things out as well. I mean, I don't know. I'm guessing this is a trend, with Asian leagues, and I wouldn't be surprised to see major league teams do this in this coming season.
Well, you think about it for a second. Closing a game is the same like a throw day in between starts. So you can necessarily have a guy start and save his throw day to close a game 2 or 3 games later.
Right.
So that could be, a trend. It doesn't bode well, but it could be something to look into in the future, just like the opener concept in the major leagues, like Tampa started.
Right. That's an interesting concept as well, but you can kind of understand that. I mean, it's that you could argue that might not be much different from if it was a traditional starting pitcher that just got rocked and taken out early. So, I mean, as far as an argument, as far as how long to leave a pitcher in, I suppose, but...
It's also the fact that, let's just face it, these managers are getting to the point where they can't trust their bullpen. The most reliable pitchers are the American guys.
Right. And,
sorry to say that.
Yeah, I would agree. Although I would say in the defense of the bullpen pitchers, it's not just the actual pitchers themselves. I mean, a lot of them, they'll throw balls to get the batter to line the shortstop or the second or whatever, but there's also the defensive lapse and the overthrowing to first base and letting the baseball go 5-hole, to use a hockey term as opposed to a baseball term. I mean, I don't know, a lot of times it's not just the pitcher's fault. I think sometimes the fielders behind them contributed to that as well.
A lot of times, all it takes is one play to open floodgates, and then the whole inning goes straight.
Right.
And that happens.
Yeah. And I managed to catch a few games, mainly because of my issues with my Roku, which I'm trying to watch. But I watched part of Game 2 before I went into work, and then I watched 3 and 4 over the weekend. And I would admit, the 3 and 4 I had to watch on Twitch, so I did not hear the ESPN commentary for that. But I would imagine Game 2, Eduardo must have been losing a gasket. He usually does whenever he sees any kind of defensive gaffes or anything like that. And I guess as a player and a manager, and the fact that his father was a well-regarded player as well, he has it in his blood as far as what's good fundamental baseball. And to see that I feel sorry for Perez. I kind of worry about him when I hear him in the games. I'm thinking, I hope he doesn't have any medical issues resulting from this. But,
Well, he does seem to have a thing now for not only Sung Won Na, but for Yu Yang as well. Probably because of the amount of games that they've covered by all the times this season. So anytime those two guys do well, and then on the other side with Hernandez, he's definitely got their fill of those three guys in particular.
Right.
So tomorrow it'd be interesting with Alcantara versus Ruchinski. And I know there's not supposed to be any sort of quote-unquote favoritism, but you got to think that they're kind of rooting for Alcantara in a Game 7, which in that case,
yeah, I would think so too. Just as far as interest, as far as the network, if you're broadcasting a championship series, you want it to go as far as you can. And I imagine there's probably some interest in ESPN and for the Seoul network in Korea to be interested in that. But the same token, it's still a good story. You have the defending champion Bears against the regular season champion Dinos, and I don't know. I think it's been a great series, and you commented on this with the CPBL, and this was the first time I got to see this with the KBO. I love the fact that you have both cheering sections there. It's like, usually you just see the home team, playing their batting music, and the cheerleaders dancing and all that. But you see that whole stadium divided. You see basically, depending who's at home and first base side, you see the Bears and their cheerleaders, and then everybody, clapping their fans and chanting and singing and all that. And then when the Dinos are up, their cheerleaders and pep squad are doing the same thing. And it's really fun, really a lot of fun to see.
It also helps the neutral site bit, which I'm sure they're not used to having it go late in the season and trying to get it into a dome, which was probably their main goal, being that the weather has changed.
True. Although I'm kind of surprised at that in a way, Eric, just because of the geography, as far as, even though that's not the Bears' home stadium, it is still their home city. You would think I would think that they would have had more fans, but maybe just a lot of people want to see somebody different from the Bears winning the World Series, and you might have a lot of new Dinos fans just because they're not the Doosan Bears. But at the same token, it's if I'm not mistaken, I think the Dinos, Changwon, I think they may be maybe the furthest away from the Seoul teams. And in fact, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think they're further south from a lot of the teams, and they are kind of geographically farther. And usually for a lot of teams, I think the Dino Stadium might be among the farthest to travel, by bus or whatever. So, I mean, good for the Dinos fans if it's, everybody coming from Changwon up to Seoul to see this. But either way, I think it'll be a good time, and there will be people in Changwon and Durham, North Carolina waiting to hold a parade for these guys, hopefully. But I know we joked about that a lot. But, I mean, that's been a great story, too, how the Dinos caught on in North Carolina and in this country. And maybe it's tailed off a little bit somewhat with Major League Baseball and then with football and basketball either starting or coming up. But still, I mean, it was interesting how that state happened to catch on to that team just because of an accidental set of letters for their sponsorship. Like I even joked and said if they were the Hyundai Dinos, I don't think that would have happened. But
let me tell you, and I just thought of this, as we're talking, there was actually a part of me that actually hopes that the Rays get so that this way, if they're playing an exhibition game against their AAA team in Durham, North Carolina, that a guy like who played on the Dinos, can actually come there, and a whole bunch of people with Dinos t-shirts and Bulls t-shirts are there, kind of cheering on their guy.
That would be cool. That I would actually, I have seen the single A Durham Bulls in the Carolina League, but I don't know. That might actually be fun. That might actually be if it's like a weekend series or whatever, I might actually make that a road trip. Maybe even, I don't know, call out sick, or call out or use some vacay time or whatever. But of course, that's a pipe dream right now. You can't even have fans in the stands with COVID, with that kind of thing. But hopefully that'll change by then. So that would be fun to see. And
I'm pretty much the eternal optimist at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, I come big chunk of my Florida time when I do snowbird is doing the spring training thing, trying to interact with players for autograph opportunities or whatever. If you see the trunk of my vehicle, it's got a load of memorabilia that hopefully, under a normal circumstance, would get signed. Hopefully next year becomes semi-normal again, and things do get autographed again. There is some sort of player interaction.
Yeah. Well, I hope definitely for your sake, but also maybe for the show's sake too. I'll talk to you about that probably off the air. But I mean, if you can get a hold of some of these players, that might lead to some interesting interviews or if not just reporting, for as far as the spring training, that kind of thing too. But yeah, that would be fun. All right. Okay, well, Eric, do you have any further comments regarding the Korean series you'd like to add? Or?
No, I would like it wrapped up with Rushinsky, but now that I think about it, there is a part of me that wants the Game 7 just so we can have the KBO live on another day.
I agree. And, yeah, no matter what, it's going to be sad, but I'm hoping that they'll be able to resume, be closer to normal, put it that way. I mean, KBO actually did pretty well with this pandemic, and the South Korean government did as well with that.
They did very well, and the off-season hot stove, as far as what guys are being signed for next year, that'll get underway quick, and there'll be new additions, new subtractions, more movement
that would be interesting. I would definitely like to see that, and I'm hoping things clear up enough where some of the KBO teams like the Tigers or anyone would want to come to the United States to do some spring training, and we can maybe go to see them. That would be. We've talked about that a few times, Eric, but yeah, still want to do that for sure. For sure.
Oh yeah.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to move the World Tour over to Japan, and we'll talk about the NPB for a little bit and their series, the Japan series going on. So, you're listening to Pro Baseball World Tour here on RGC Multimedia. We'll be right back. Alright, folks, welcome back to Pro Baseball World Tour. Rick Crabb, Eric Marin back. And as promised, we moved our World Tour from the Korean Series to the Japan Series, where we have the Hawks facing off against the Yomiuri Giants. And as of this recording, I think we're going into Game 3. The Hawks so far have a 2-game lead over the Giants, and actually, they're beating them pretty handily, at least during Game 2, it looks like. I have an article regarding that from the Japan Times. Dateline Osaka. When the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks were up to bat, the relative quiet in Kyocera Dome was broken up by a Hawks fan with a snare drum. The fan played during the top half of every inning, striking in slow, deliberate rhythmic patterns before stopping so the crowd could repeat the pattern by clapping. Occasionally, the beats came at a more frenetic pace, leaving the crowd to dissolve into a mismatch of disorganized clapping with no hope of keeping up. That's what it's like to face the Hawks in the Japan series. 1 second you think you're on their wavelength. The next, they left you hopelessly flailing behind and choking on a cloud of dust. The relentless Hawks put 6 runs on the board before the end of the 3rd inning. Alfredo Despaigne hit a grand slam in the 7th, and the Pacific League champions cruised to a 13-2 rout of the Yomiuri Giants that left them 2 victories away from a 4th straight Japan Series title. Quote, "It was huge for us to get off to a good start by scoring runs early," said Hawks manager Kimiyasu Kudo. "Everybody set the table for their teammates, and I think that's what led to the win." Yuki Yanagita, Yurzabel Gracial, and Despaigne each drove in a run in the 1st inning. Takoya Kai hit a solo homer in the 2nd, and Gracial hit a 2-run shot in the 3rd. Just like that, it was 6-0 before the game was even an hour old. Despaigne hit a sacrifice fly in the 5th, ending a soul-crushing grand slam off reliever Yohei Kagiya in the 7th. SoftBank got 2 more runs on a throwing error by Giants pitcher Kan Otaki in the 9th. The offensive onslaught left the Hawks with a 2-0 lead in the best-of-7 series. They also got the momentum as they head home to Fukuoka, where Game 3 will take place on Tuesday. SoftBank has a record 10 straight Japan Series games since 2018. The Hawks have also won 14 straight Japan Series games at home since Game 7 in 2011. Quote, "I think all the fans who came here gave us energy," Kudo said. "Since we're going back to Fukuoka, we want to play with a new mindset and hopefully win again in front of our fans." The last time a Pacific League team lost a Japan Series contest at home was when the Giants beat Masahiro Tanaka and the Tohoku Rakuten Golden Eagles in Game 6 in 2013. SoftBank starter Shuda Ishikawa benefited from the run support in his first Japan Series start. Ishikawa, an 11-game winner during the regular season, allowed 2 runs on 2 hits in 5 1/3 innings. He struck out 7 and walked 1. Quote, "Our hitters gave me run support early, and I didn't want to waste their effort," he said. "I tried to pitch with good tempo, which is one of my strengths, and it worked out well." Despaigne tied a Japan Series record with 6 RBIs in one game, and his grand slam was the first in franchise history in the Japan Series. Gracial, last season's Series MVP, is off to a good start this year. After picking up a pair of hits in Game 1, he was 2 for 3 with a home run and a pair of RBIs in Game 2. Gracial has at least one hit in his last 9 Japan Series games, which ties the record. Outbank's Ryoya Kurihara said he didn't know whether or not he'd be able to get a hit in Sunday's game after going 3 for 3 with 4 RBIs in the opener. He opened up 4 for 5 in the lead for MVP honors at this juncture. Yomiuri entered this year's Japan Series looking for revenge after being swept by SoftBank last season. After 2 games, though, they are in danger of being swept again. The only thing the Kyojin have to hang their hats on so far is Zealous Wheeler, who hit a 2-run home run in the 5th on Sunday. Wheeler drove in the team's only run in Game 1 and saved another by throwing Kurihara out at the plate earlier in the game. Giant starter Nobutaka Imamura was making his first Japan Series start. Had a nightmare beginning. He struck out Ukyo Shuto to start the game, and everything went downhill from there. As the lefty failed to make it out of the second, Imamura was charged with 4 runs in 1 2/3 innings. The past 2 games may reignite the debate about whether or not to introduce the DH in the Central League. The DH rule is in effect for every game of the Japan Series this year to protect the health of the players. In normal years, pitchers hit in games hosted by the CL team. But with no interleague schedule this year, none of the Pacific League pitchers had to bat or run bases this season. With the DH rule in effect, the powerful Hawks could deploy all their offensive weapons, namely Despaigne, without taking a hit in the field or choosing which bat to leave on the bench for the first 2 games. The Yomiuri starters, conversely, were dealt with an extra bat in the opposing lineup instead of facing a pitcher at least once or twice. Of course, just about every spot in the Hawks lineup burned the Giants pitchers on Sunday, and that was contributed by staff writer Kaz Nagatsuka of the Japan Times. So Eric, looks like the Hawks look like they have a good start in this Japan Series. Looks like they may take the Giants again. What's your take on this series so far?
I may have said this more times than not. It makes me wonder how a guy like Alfredo Despaigne, who I've known roughly for 7 years because of the World Baseball Classic with the Cuban national team, makes me wonder how you can only excel in the Japan League and not even get a sniff in the majors. Because you see guys that are coming over from Japan and Korea left and right that are actual, natives of the country. You've got Despaigne and Gracial, 2 of Cuba's premier hitters that have excelled in Japan, but never get a sniff in the majors. So it makes you wonder if the Japanese pitchers are that bad compared to the Americans. I don't know. I'm bewildered by the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's that or if it's somewhat of an unfair bias with major league scouts in our country, or maybe a combination of both. I haven't seen enough Japanese baseball to see any noticeable difference as far as the fielding ability. From what I've been told, they're second only to the Major League Baseball as far as, quality of baseball overall for a professional league. But, yeah, I had to wonder because, I mean, maybe, I don't know if it's because some of the parks in Japan are smaller. They don't seem to be. I mean, especially not like Tokyo Dome, that kind of thing. But, no, but, I mean, there may be lesser quality pitching, but I'm not so sure if that's really the case. But, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I have to wonder about that as well. I mean, we see that.
You also have to take into consideration the defection thing. You know, where any Cuban would have to actually defect.
Right.
In order to even get a look-see in the major leagues. The last one doing it, obviously, was Luis Robert with the White Sox. But, you know, for a couple of years there, where the agreement was actually signed before our illustrious 45th president rolled back that thing, that didn't even seem to make a difference.
No.
MLB scouts weren't even looking at guys like Spain or Gracial or any of the other premier hitters as far as making them over.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, and you have made this point on a few of our episodes. So, as far as I didn't even think of the Cuban aspect of that. I mean, you think it's just it could be a case where Major League Baseball teams might acknowledge their talents, but think the headache might not be worth the effort to bring them over because of dealing with the international red tape, especially with the administration of our 45th president.
The processes of getting Cuban players over was always a distraction. I mean, if you remember a few years back when the Gurriels came over and defected, it was more or less, at the time, they were trying to make both Gurriels sign together as a package deal, which didn't happen. I mean, Yuli wound up going to the Astros, where Lourdes, also known as Uni Jr., wound up going to the Blue Jays. They were trying to, originally, as far as I remember, make it a package deal where both Cubans would get signed, but according to the certain rules of free agency, the signing processes were different. I don't know.
Yeah. And it's interesting also in that case, it's with the Blue Jays. Now, I mean, I don't know Canada's relations with Cuba, but I would imagine they might side with the United States with certain things, but I could be totally wrong about that too. I mean, maybe they have more of a trade with Canada, or tourist area with, or industry with them or something, but.
Well, if you remember a few years back, there's always a series or two with the now defunct Can-Am League, the independent league that's around the East Coast and up in Eastern Canada, where they were able to get a quote-unquote national team to come over and play an exhibition 2 or 3 weeks against all 6 Can-Am teams. Quebec was actually responsible for actually getting them over, so the relationship between Canada and Cuba is much stronger than U.S.'s.
Right. I would imagine so, but. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, again, this is more quality baseball to watch. I mean, that's one thing, like I've said with you, watching these games and researching some of these newer leagues. I mean, getting to see baseball year round and getting to see some quality stuff too. I mean, entertaining stuff. If you like baseball, it doesn't matter or at least it shouldn't matter what language they're calling the game or what the stadium signage is, whatever. It's 9 innings, it's 3 outs, it's balls, strikes. It's still the same game for the most part. I mean, there may be some nuances unique to their leagues or their countries or whatever, but it's pretty much it's the same game. And I think if you consider yourself a baseball fan and you're not watching some of these leagues, you're definitely missing out. I feel like I've been missing out, before starting to watch these recently. So
the Cuban leagues have lost its luster as far as even the guys that want to come over. The teams that are in here now, I mean, the players changed to the point where if you thought that they were nobodies back then, they're definitely nobodies now. But the talent level is not what it was.
no,
Especially in a major league scout size. You
right.
might be able to see them in independent leagues popping up, but again, it's the red tape and defection process where it will lead a Cuban player that wants to continue to play ball to either go overseas to Japan or the other different countries in the smaller leagues like Italy, Germany, what have you.
Okay, that's interesting too. Yeah. And there's also, again, because of the political climate between the U.S. and Cuba, I mean, for years it seems like a lot of the Latin American talent that would come to the MLB had been from the Dominican Republic anyway, which is interesting because it's pretty much it's the same land. But there's a different vibe with that, and it makes you wonder that if we still had relations with Cuba as we did in the 50s, how, I guess, Major League Baseball or baseball around the world would change. I mean, would the Japanese be able to get a lot of Cuban talent as a result from that? Talent might decide to come to MLB if they pay, if they feel like they have more of an opportunity or they pay more, that kind of thing. But I don't know. It's an interesting what if, I would say, with that, Eric.
I always get bewildered by players that don't even get a shot in America, which is always like the MLB dream, the field with the dream kind of thing.
Right.
Is the majors. Some people, even though they're stars, have to unfortunately settle, which is kind of a sad thing. That's why, a guy like Robert that makes it big with the White Sox makes you feel good, but at the same time, you're just, it's a sad situation within the country.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen that with other leagues too. Like with KBO, we've seen that with Roberto Ramos. I mean, I even commented as far as he was in the Rockies organization, and because they already had a first baseman, and Ramos was a left-handed hitter, and all that, all this who struck John. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes if you have a quality player, you got to find room for him somehow. I mean. And yes, I mean, they were a National League team. They didn't have a DH, and it's possible that MLB may even actually institute the DH in both leagues, but that remains to be seen. But either way, if the Rockies didn't see him, I mean, I'm sure there have been other teams that could have given him a chance, but I don't know.
That's why I wonder if once the off-season becomes the off-season in Korea, I am actually curious how many Major League scouts could have been at the Korean series to scout guys like Ramos, Rojas, Hernandez, all the big power guys, even Altair.
Right.
Who, all of a sudden turned his career around with 1 year in the KBO.
Mm.
I would love to know how many MLB scouts were around in the postseason and might be looking at these guys.
That'd be interesting. I mean, yeah, I mean, I was curious as far as, like, I mean, what internationally, I guess, the South Korean government would allow. But, yeah, I would imagine if all things were... Well, then again, you can't. I was going to say, I could imagine if all things were normal, they would get a lot of scouts. But chances are a lot of the MLB scouts wouldn't have had as much access to the KBO if there wasn't a pandemic and ESPN decided to air their broadcast because they didn't think there would be any Major League Baseball. So, I don't know. Another what if. You don't know what will happen, because it'll never happen. But maybe, like you said, after this season, though, there may be... I mean, you may see teams, like just as they have scouts in South America and that sort of thing, you may have some that are strictly for Korea. I mean, teams do have that now, but, I mean, you may see even more of an effort. You may see more of a scouting department instead of just one guy, flying with Japan ball from Seattle over to Korea or Japan or whatever. But I don't know. And by the way, if there are any major league teams that are accepting applications for that, I mean, I'll throw my hat in the ring. And Eric, I mean, I would definitely think you'd be qualified for that. I mean, so, but that would be a fun gig, I think, for either of us.
I probably have too much fun either schmoozing and or getting memorabilia autographed to actually, be sort of impartial. As strange as that is.
Right. Yeah, you don't want work to get in the way of a good time. So I don't blame you for that. So, yeah, but that's cool.
Conflict of interest thing,
Yeah. Yeah. Although maybe for you it wouldn't be, because you probably have like merch, some type of merch of almost. I mean, I know you have it for every CPBL team. I mean, you probably have quite a bit of where it'd be like, okay, well, I have a hat from this team or a bobblehead from this team, and I'm friends with this guy, and so I don't. So probably you probably there would be a conflict in a way, but not so much a conflict of interest as in just conflict of, oh man, which one of my friends do I root for? So, but
I guess it's kind of like when you're a parent and you have two brothers playing in the same game but on opposite teams, and it's like, oh shit, who do I root for?
Yeah. Well, let's see. One of them plays for the Uni Lions, the other plays for Brother Elephants. I'm going to get a split Uni Lions Brother Elephants jersey with their name on the back. That's what it seems like they do. A lot of parents do in those situations, but.
Well, I mean, I can remember a game between the Yankees and I think it was the Anaheim Angels, where the Romine brothers were playing against each other. And the Romines were actually in the stands. I'm trying to remember if the game was on national TV and if the Romines were actually interviewed, like, in an inning. But it's always interesting, especially on a major league level, where brothers would be actually playing against each other in the same game. And if the parents were there, it's like, gee, who do I root for?
Right. And usually sometimes it'll happen, it'll be one parent will be like, okay, I'll root for this one, you root for the other one, or something like that. But yeah, that I would imagine it would be very difficult to choose, so.
Of course, the worst situation is when you have two brothers and one is actually an umpire.
Ooh.
And he's actually calling a game where the sibling is playing a game. Which I believe there's a rule that they can't umpire home plate.
Okay.
I'm almost positive that came into effect when Randy Wolf would pitch and Jim Wolf was part of the umpiring crew. I'm almost positive there was some sort of a rule there.
Interesting. I've been to a couple Phillies games where Randy Wolf has pitched, and I thought it was funny that their fans would actually, you'd see like, I don't know, 20 fans in the vet wearing all these Lon Chaney werewolf masks, you know, and cheering for him. It was kind of funny, but.
What do you want to be?
So anyway, so we have another, looks to be exciting series in Japan as we do in Korea. Eric, do you have any additional comments about the Japan series going forward?
Well, I'd love to see it go 7. I don't think it's gonna. It's just a question in my mind of how quickly SoftBank actually wrapped it up.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side of it, Wheeler got traded from Rakuten right at the beginning of the season to the Giants, and he's probably a big part of why they actually made it as far as they did.
Interesting.
I never understood that trade at the beginning of the year either, but it is what it is.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure some Rakuten fans probably agree with you or are scratching their heads. It's like, why did you trade to them of all things? You know, to the Yomiuri Giants. I mean, I know it's a team of tradition, but still. Yeah. They're a team of tradition, but they're kind of, it's kind of like comparing, like, the Yomiuri Giants compared to, like, the Yankees and, like, the Hawks are kind of more like a team that's had recent success. I don't want to say the Houston Astros, but somebody who's been in a lot of series recently. Maybe like the Dodgers, I suppose, but I don't know. It's always good times watching Japanese baseball and any international baseball, but the NPB especially. So, all right. Okay, folks, well, listen, we're going to take another break, and when we return, we're going to cover a few other countries. Eric has been monitoring a lot of Dominican and Mexican games, and we're going to get his take on those leagues, as well as some news that I have from Australia and Europe. You're listening to Pro Baseball World Tour here on RGC Multimedia. We'll be right back. Alright, folks, welcome back to the Pro Baseball World Tour here on RGC Multimedia. Rick Crabb and Eric Marenbach. And we're going to rack up our virtual frequent flyer miles going from Japan over to Central and South America, including the countries south of the border, Mexico, and then in the Caribbean and the Dominican leagues, as well as some of the other Central American leagues. Eric, I know you've been monitoring those leagues very carefully. What's your take on what's going on south of the border from us?
Well, the league is a little condensed a little bit. As you remember from a couple of weeks ago, they took a little bit of a break because of the country in general changing its color zones. Mm-hmm. I believe it went a red or an orange, which kind of forced the entire country to take a temporary hiatus. So they took about 10 days off. It could have been good for the league as far as, like, injuries go.
Mm-hmm.
But teams are back playing again. Obregon is actually 19-7 from their first 26 games in the first half. They look really, really good. Highlight Culiacan. They're unfortunately in third place, 5 games out. Hermosillo's only 2 games out. But first half is quickly coming to a close, and we see where it goes for the second half and how their playoff system works.
Okay.
Dominican-wise, you've got your 6 teams. There's been a lot of weather issues lately where games are getting postponed, and or there was a COVID outbreak or 2. It hasn't really postponed any games league-wide. I think there was 1 or 2 games that got pushed back a little bit, but nothing too serious yet.
Okay.
So let's hope that.
This pandemic is worldwide for sure, and I think I commented on another episode as far as how things going on in Mexico, where a lot of industries, factories had literally shut down because of this, as they have different places around the world too. But so it'll be interesting to see how they get their season results. Now, Eric, have you heard of any further cases as far as in Mexico? Obviously, they took a break for it, but I mean,
in the league, within the country, yes, but nothing in the league as far as like the player coming down with it.
Right.
So, not what it hasn't affected any of the players there.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's doing something like, even though within the country in general, it has gone to, I don't know. I'm confused.
Right. Yeah, it makes you wonder because, I mean, we're seeing this with other sports. I mean, in our country with the National Football League, it seems like they're making the Miami Marlins look like model teams making the Miami Marlins look like a baseball hub compared to what's going on with the NFL. I mean, my Baltimore Ravens, for example, have 2 running backs that tested positive for COVID, and they're supposed to be playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Thanksgiving, which could decide whether or not the team actually goes to the playoffs. So, and every team in that league, for some reason, you're getting a lot of that. So, I mean, obviously the Mexican leagues are doing something right, so good for them, and I hope they can keep doing that. So,
And then, of course, you get some coaches, in some sports that are saying like COVID's just being used as an excuse to postpone a game. You saw that happen over the weekend with one of the college teams.
right, it was with Florida State and Clemson, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily because Trevor Lawrence was, being kept out because he had it at one point, but Dabo Sweeney, the coach, wasn't too happy with it.
Yeah.
And he basically came out that COVID's being used as an excuse to postpone games.
Right. Yeah, because they were even saying it was something with the administration didn't want to deal with it, and Clemson was complaining, saying, it's like, well, I'm pretty sure it's not the players that didn't want to play, it's not the coaches that didn't want to play, it's the so it's some people it's all about money. That's all they really care about. A lot of these cases. I mean, that's the only reason you would have these universities that aren't allowing their students to go to school, but they want their football players to grunt and sweat and tackle each other and, possibly infect each other while they do this, So mainly because it's like they can still get the TV money even if they can't get money from the boosters or they can't get any fans to come to their stadiums or anything like that. But I don't know. Yeah. Well, to go on to a more positive note, I'm going to switch to some news moving over to Europe, where they have According to this headline from the baseballjobsoverseas.com, the headline says, "A Field of Dreams story from a small town in Europe." Now, Eric, you and I spoke a while back about they had I think it was in Croatia or Sarajevo, one of the countries where they have a baseball festival in September. And see how this relates to it. It says, this article is contributed by reporter Carter Cromwell. As the 1990s began, baseball was pretty much nothing in Attnang, Austria. Then Jurek Korzanovsky and a few friends showed up and started to make it something. Nearly 3 decades later, the Attnang Athletics Club has a loyal fan base, a very nice ballpark, and 4 Austrian league championships to its credit. That's something, but the transition from nothing didn't happen overnight. When we got started, it was just a few goofballs throwing the ball around, said Andre Gruber, one of the original players and still a member of the team. Quote, "It's hard to believe that a small club from a small town could have come so far." Wolfgang Strini, another of the original players, said with a chuckle, "We were just lucky that we had several crazy people who kept things going and helped us get to where we are now." Sounds like they could work with us. Indeed. Let's go back to the beginning. Born in 1946, Korzanovsky was originally from Austria, but moved with his family to Venezuela, a hotbed of baseball, when he was young. Later, he spent time in Australia and followed the game there as well. He returned to Austria, where he was when he was in his late 30s. And he and his friends established a team in Attnang in 1991 as part of a 4-team league. Quote, "He traveled all over the world," Gruber said. "Baseball had been the only constant in his life, and he really missed it when he came back to Austria in his late 30s. My cousin started playing and told me I should try it," Gruber continued. "He said that they had this new game going and it was a lot of fun. I'd been a soccer player, but I was too slow and short to be successful. I loved baseball right away. There are so many different facets of the game that fascinated me." Strini had seen the movie Bad News Bears, had played catch with some balls that a friend's father had brought back from the United States, and watched some major league games on television with German commentators. But he never played the game until he was 18 and showed up one Sunday with a friend. Quote, "There were no clubs in existence then, so we decided to start one," he said. "The score of our first game was something like 35-26. We didn't know how to play." The team played its first season on a soccer field, which had no pitching mound and created some odd dimensions, such as a 120-foot right field and a 400-foot left field. "Kind of a mess," Gruber said with a laugh. "After practices, we'd shovel some sand around to fix up the field. Eventually, though, the wear and tear from the baseball made the field unavailable for soccer, so the team had to move. They rented some land from a farmer in a nearby village, which also produced some oddities." Quote, "There was a restaurant right behind the backstop, and there were actually 2 fences in the outfield," Strini said. "The first was too close, so the rule was that you had to hit the ball over the second fence to get a home run. The balls hit between the 2 fences were considered ground rule doubles. There were also some sheep grazing in the area between the fences, but luckily we never hit any of them." In 1996, the club returned to Attnang, where the city rented it some land at a nominal fee. The team members and other volunteers built the diamond, the cost covered by donations and proceeds. In 1996, let's see. Okay, we covered that. Apologize. Okay, quote, "The city had really helped us out big time," said Gruber, whose day job is in banking. Quote, "The players, parents, and friends built the ballpark, and we all paid for it. We started the tournament to make some money, and we were lucky to have 50 people watching at first. It wasn't something that had been seen before in our town. We were like unicorns. People would watch for an hour or so, then leave scratching their heads wondering, what are these guys doing? It took a while, but they gradually learned, and the club steadily became more solid and competitive. The tournament started in 1997, and the club brought in its first import players in 1999. Sebastian Libetzeller, now the club president, started as a player in 1998. Some friends had played, and a younger brother had played on a youth team. Quote, "I went to practice one day and pretty soon got involved. Liebeseller said. I made a comment in a meeting one day and that the website wasn't that good, so it fell to me to redesign it. I started with that, and now I've been president for 6 years. Liebeseller, who works as a sales manager for a food product company, acknowledged that he didn't know at first how or if the club would develop. I was in my early 20s then. We'd start to talk about making the tournament bigger, building a stadium, and so forth. But you didn't know if it was just talk or something more. But there were also a few guys, a core, that were interested in doing more. Stuff the other clubs weren't. People like our former president, Rainer Kronkel. They always thought you could keep pushing things forward. Strini added, we were lucky to have that core group. It was the backbone of the club in terms of managing, making connections, getting sponsors, all the management stuff that is so necessary. The tournament gradually got bigger, and the club added an accompanying music festival, which helped draw attendees. Perhaps the biggest move came in when, under Kronkel's direction, the club started building a new field with accompanying facilities, including permanent seating for about 400 people and standing room only areas that can hold another 400 or so, concession stands, and a picnic area. There's even a tiki bar that just passed the center field fence. Quote, we first took down the old field and started from scratch. That took 8 to 9 months, Liebeseller said. Then came the clubhouse and the stands. Altogether, the project took about 2 years. The work was all done by volunteers, except the things that had to be done with heavy machinery. People would work on it after they got home with their day jobs. That's when I began to think we really had something with staying power, he continued. It was kind of like Field of Dreams stuff. Now when we do work on the field during the winter, we'll get 40 or 50 people to help. We still have people come to games and tell us they helped build part of the ballpark. A new ballpark opened in 2007. Unfortunately, Kornofsky didn't get to see it, as he passed away in late 2006. However, the new facility sparked more interest, more fans, more people wanting to play, more teams wanting to play in the tournament. The music festival held at the same time now draws as many as 2,000 people nightly. Before we built the stadium, people thought something suspicious was going on. Guys throwing a ball around and hitting it, Liebeseller said. But then they started to realize we weren't just goofing around. Now you see adults and children in town wearing our caps. Our stadium capacity is too small now. The club made its big breakthrough by winning the Austrian title in 2008, and it followed with championships in 2010, 2016, and 2017. The club supports one adult team in its first level league, one in the second level league, 4 youth teams, and a women's fast pitch softball team, as well as some recreational slow pitch softball. A grant from Baseball Tomorrow Fund, jointly sponsored by Major League Baseball and the MLB Players Association, helped build a second field for youth teams, and the field also supports the women's softball team. In addition, the club conducts a summer camp for youth. There are 110 players involved in different programs, and about 25% are female athletes. The club's goal is to continue making steady development. Quote, we're working more in the off-season now. This used to be a 6-month sport for us, but now we started a more professional off-season training a couple of years ago, Liebeseller said. In general, we want to keep getting more knowledge while improving our coaching and continuing to focus on youth development. Also, there is a greater demand for use of the fields because of the number of teams we support. So, we're in the process of adding lights and expect those to be ready for next season, Liebeseller said. We wanted to always be a step ahead as far as infrastructure goes. So, that is from Baseball Jobs Overseas in Australia. And I'll send you a link to this article, Eric, and I'll post a link to this in the description of the YouTube video, folks. It looks like a nice little stadium. I mean, kind of looks like something like maybe a single A or a college park here, but still, I mean, sounds like a good time. I mean, not only see some baseball, but have like a music festival going with it too. So, I mean, it looks like these folks are doing it right, and they're also trying to develop youth, so I guess they'll have more players down the road. So, I don't know. Eric, do you have any take on this, or?
I gotta tell you, I had never heard that before, but Australia is a very hopping place. As far as their winter leagues go, they've been developed quite well.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminds me of a few years ago, back when the Pakistanis actually had a team in the World Baseball Classic qualifier.
Mm.
These guys were like, I don't know, the Pakistan version of the Bad News Bears, where they had like no concept of the game whatsoever.
Mm.
And of course, obviously, in their group play for the qualifier, they got, for lack of a better word, their butts handed to them.
Right.
But you got to start from somewhere. The ground floor has got to come somewhere. To the point where you've got to have management and or coaches that are committed to developing stadiums, players, getting the right equipment, and so forth. And it doesn't happen overnight. This could take like 10, 15 years. Israel tried to do it a few years back, even before their little miniature success with shocking the world back in 2016 and 17. And it hasn't come yet in Israel, but in a few years, with stadium development, player development, coaching, the whole thing, you never know with these countries. If they're committed to it, it'll happen.
It seems like they're doing everything right, Eric. Like you said, it's taking time for them, but it started off with a bunch of, like, international baseball super fans. I don't know, kind of sounds familiar. But, I mean, especially you had the one gentleman who was born in Austria, then he went to Venezuela and caught the love of the game there. Then he went to Australia and enjoyed the game there as well, and then wanted to bring it back to his home country. And, I mean, you have him and a few other players living that dream, and then they managed to basically get into what professional wrestlers call money marks, basically people who want to financially back everything as far as getting the sponsors and all that going, and then getting the community involved as far as the volunteers helping to build the field and pay for the field, and getting, the music festival to raise funds for it as well too, and then eventually getting Major League Baseball to help them out, which kudos to them for doing that as well. So, and I mean, Major League Baseball, I mean, they're not just being nice people as well. I mean, they're looking for talent worldwide. They want to market their brand worldwide, and they want to probably get some players from Austria. I mean, if this league develops enough of it, I mean, teams could, scout, I guess, in Europe as like they do with Asia and Central and South America. So I don't know. And it's good for them. I mean, it sounds like another place you might want to go see some baseball, Eric. I don't know about you. But
like I said, it takes time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of the leagues are poorly populated around the world because they don't get the recognition in the world, word of mouth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
The faster word gets around, and maybe you get some former major leaguers and whatever to actually come to these countries and do clinics and, kind of spur the sport from the ground level up. It can only get better from there.
Yeah, and also, like, if you have, like, somehow they have an Austrian player that does well and goes to MLB, and before you know it, they try to sell the MLB The Show video game over there, and they have, like, an Australian player wearing, I don't know, a Yankees or a Cardinals uniform, and basically marketing the game around him over there, so.
I said all it takes is one.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Well, we move on from Austria down to Australia. We spoke a little bit about the Australian Baseball League with 2 teams temporarily suspending their operations because of COVID and travel and that sort of thing. Well, it seems that because of this, the league is restructuring their schedule. In fact, they revised it where they're going to be extending into January, and it looks like they may be doing actually having some bubbles in January in Australia, not only for the ABL, but also for their women's league, it looks like, too. Clicking on a story from their website. It says, ABL reveals revised schedule, headlined by massive January. The Australian Baseball League's revised schedule for 2021 season will see games played on 26 out of 31 days in January. 2 week-long hubs, one in Adelaide, the other in Brisbane, headline a busy month to start 2021 and give baseball star fans a stack of action. Let me click on the link. Okay. The opening weekend matchups remain the same as the previously released schedule for the former Australian Conference, with Sydney welcoming Melbourne and Perth hosting Canberra. But the Blue Sox and Aces will start the season a day earlier than originally planned on December 17th, instead playing a doubleheader on the Saturday. A number of changes have been made to incorporate Adelaide and Brisbane into the 6-team schedule after Auckland and Geelong, Korea withdrew from the upcoming season. The Heat's remaining games have also been pushed back until later in January to give Perth every chance of hosting based on current border restrictions. The Bandits and Giants will make a later start to the season after basing their preparations on an early January start under the initial international conference model. Brisbane will host Adelaide and Melbourne on January 5th to open a hub in the Sunshine State. Baseball Australia Chief Executive Cam Vale said the schedule set the stage for an exciting season and thanked fans for their patience. Quote, the 6 teams and their key stakeholders have in the past, despite the challenges thrown at us, shown why we are putting in the work to play for the fans and for the future of the ABL, capitalizing on the opportunities in front of us, Vale said. The ABL teams have worked hard with us over the past week to ensure as minimum impact as possible on the previous release schedule, and we appreciate the patience and understanding of both our teams and fans during the process. Quote, we faced some hurdles along the way, but now we have an exciting schedule which will develop an action-packed January and thrilling race to the playoffs. Vale said the need for a revised schedule has also allowed a rethink of some aspects of the previously outlined fixture. Quote, we've taken on Prime Minister Scott Morrison's message that the country will be open by Christmas and we are ready to play ball, he said. Quote, and by pushing some of the content back into the new year, the revised schedule puts us in a stronger position. Each team will play 24 regular season games with Canberra, Melbourne, Perth, and Sydney retaining 12 home fixtures, albeit with some opponents changing. Adelaide and Brisbane will play host to 12 games across 7-day hubs, with the hosts each playing 8 games as part of them. In total, there will be 35 game days. Bale said the playoff format would be announced in coming weeks, along with a confirmation of some exciting broadcast partnerships in Australia and overseas. So, you have the Australian Baseball League organizing, possibly using the hub model, which sounds like a good strategy, Eric, since they're pushing the games back a little bit, I guess, to allow for this and hope, and I guess they're, like everywhere else in the world, hoping for the vaccine to develop and all that kind of thing. I don't know. What's your take on what's going on with them so far?
I'll tell you, it's going to be really interesting because I'm used to the Australian League playing 4 games a week with a lot of Saturday doubleheaders. Mm-hmm. If you're going to have a revised schedule where you're going to try and condense everything, it'll be interesting to see if the caliber of play rises to a different level.
Right. Well, I mean, we've seen that with the other leagues. We've seen KBO to an extent, and Major League Baseball even more so. And I mean, yeah, there are. I mean, maybe it seems like at first the quality was a little off because of. Although with Major League Baseball, it's a little different because they did at least get in some spring training, but then there was a big layoff, and then they started playing. So I don't know how that would affect with the Australian League, as far as any kind of preseason that they would have. Maybe they just do away with that and just go to, just have a later schedule as far as trying to get everything reorganized and all the COVID protocols in place. So.
Well, I mean, the Dominicans actually have done similar schedule changes, and Venezuela as well, in order to facilitate for the COVID stuff, where they're foregoing their playoff system, which is a round robin normally, and just jumping into the Caribbean World Series. Because let's face it, in order to fit everything in, you have to get the Caribbean World Series over by the beginning of February in order for the major leaguers to come back.
Yeah, that's true too. Now, I wonder, in light of that, though, you may have, like, some major league teams, if they have, like, a, high salaried player, be like, okay, you know what? You can't go down there this year because it cuts too close into our season. I mean, you have seen that in Major League Baseball, like with the World Baseball Classic, and you've seen it in other sports, such as with soccer, where they won't let, where, I don't know, you see, like, some English Premier League teams won't allow players to play for Team USA or other countries that, or wherever their home countries may be, mainly because they have too much of an investment in those players. I'm guessing Major League Baseball might feel the same way as far as, like, players play in the in the Dominican leagues and such.
Well, that's exactly my point. Especially in the Australian league, you get a lot of guys, believe it or not, from Taiwan and Japan that come over for the first couple of weeks or so. Just because of the climate.
Right.
Because it's hard to get cooler in Japan and certain parts of Taiwan. So they do play in the warmer climate of Australia during the winter/summer/ whatever you want to call it over there.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to get that opportunity because of the condensed schedule and the movement.
Right. That's interesting. And I'm going to the ABL's website. I've been seeing they've had a lot of players coming from the minor league systems of our teams, our country, in Major League Baseball. I mean, I've seen, they would say, prospect coming from the Tigers, coming from the Mets. I even saw one person from the Orioles, I think, went to a team. So, I mean, you have a lot. It seems like there's an exchange here, too. I'm guessing it's like the other leagues outside of the United States. Players are trying to get work in other countries to keep their career going, or just to get more experience, I guess, at bats, and hopefully it'll help them move up the ranks in their team's organization. But
the Twins and Rays are known for having a good relationship with Australia, so they do send a lot of guys over to play winter ball over there. I know that for a fact.
Right. Okay. And that would make sense. I mean, it's... Plus, down there with their climate, I mean, they can play at different times of the year, too. I mean, some winter leagues, probably end about when the Australian League would begin, I suppose. So, yeah, I guess you could see even some players globetrotting where they would play like a winter league, without COVID, winter league here, maybe like an Arizona league or something, and then maybe play down in Mexico or Dominican Republic, or even play in Australia when those leagues finish up. So as far as like conditioning for players and all, granted with no pandemic, you could have a player early in his career, be playing baseball year-round somewhere to keep in shape. But I don't know, maybe... I guess it would depend on the team and the individual, maybe... I don't know, maybe the Dodgers might not want their prospect for the Dominican Republic playing down there and in Australia or whatever, with risk of them getting hurt. Again, going to the investment in these players. So, all right.
Through all of it, I just wonder how Manny Ramirez is handling it.
I hope so too, and I hope in a way I didn't jinx him, since I actually bought his jersey when I bought your bobblehead. So it's like, by doing that, I might have given him the kiss of death, or I don't know, some kind of bad luck. I hope not, but because I am looking forward to seeing him down there just to see how well he does. But I want to see some of the other teams too, and we'll see what happens. So.
I'm going to try one of these buddy who actually is a big part of the Brisbane Bandits translating. He definitely wants to see Manny.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Okay. All right, Eric. Well, listen, do you have any other comments regarding the ABL or any of the other leagues that we discussed, or any that we haven't had a chance to discuss yet?
No, the leagues that are going on, seem to be business as usual. Dominican has been going basically every day of the week. Mexico's going their usual 6 out of 7 days. Cuba's finally starting to dry out, so they're actually starting to play games again.
Okay.
And, you'll get leagues that'll pop up slowly but surely and play a limited amount of games for the good of the country.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully they can continue to do that and continue to entertain anybody around the world who wants to watch them. So, okay. All right, folks. Well, listen, we're going to wrap things up for this week's episode. Looking forward to watching more baseball. Definitely looking forward to see a new Korean Series champion, a new Japan Series champion, and seeing some more Mexico and Dominican and the Australian baseball like a month down the road, so, and anyone else. So, all right, folks. Once again, we want to thank you for listening, and by all means, please leave some comments in the video as well as in our Facebook groups and any input. I mean, Eric and I were still discussing as far as a game to watch, as far as a virtual watch-along party. So, if you have any suggestions of any leagues, any teams you want us to do that with, send them to us, and, we will take them under advisement. All right. Eric, do you have anything else to say to our good folks before we hand it off to the possibly new Korean Series champion cheerleaders, or?
No, I probably mimic exactly what you're saying. We would love to do some sort of a watch party with either the Dominicans, Mexicans, Australians, or whatever. It's up to you guys to kind of lead us in the right direction.
That would be cool. I'd be curious to see when the Australian ones start. I mean, when in January, because, I don't know, I could see us, with COVID regulations keeping people out of bars and restaurants, I'd be curious to see if there's a game that would fall around New Year's Eve around our time. We can watch together or something. That might be fun. But, it depends on the scheduling, I guess, of the respective leagues. But,
right.
Yeah. Okay. All right, folks. Thank you for watching this episode. We'll talk to you next week.